Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Convention of States, Indiana Live. Let me ask you a question. Do you think we have a big problem with our federal government? Well, if you do, stay tuned because we at Convention of States have a solution as big as the problem. Well, welcome everyone. I want to once again welcome you to our broadcast this evening. My name is Dale Parrish. I am the state director for Convention of States here in Indiana. And let me give you just an overview of what we're going to be doing tonight. We basically have three segments in our broadcast. The first segment, we're going to be discussing a topic this evening with one of our region captains, Gary Harbaugh. And Gary is going to be, Gary and I are going to discuss the topic of self-governance. Now, if you were with us a couple broadcasts ago, I had Paul Phillips in, and he was talking about self-governance from the standpoint of our founders, all right? Well, Gary's going to take a little different approach, a little different take on the topic this evening, and I think you're going to find it very interesting. Now, our second segment is I'll get into a PowerPoint presentation, hopefully, if I can get it on my screen here. I see I've lost it here temporarily. Hopefully, I can get this again. But this second segment, we're going to be, just going to give you some general information about what's going on in the state here with regard to Convention of States. So now I have lost Gary. Gary, are you still there? But then the last segment, and then hopefully we'll get into the basics of Convention of States. This will be a PowerPoint presentation that I'll do, and then we'll close out the broadcast this evening. Now, I want to once again, I want to give you a warning that in the event that your screen would freeze up or go blank, please note this. You must assume that we've had encountered a technical problem, and that don't wait for us to come back up because it just takes too long to get everything going up again. So if that happens, just plan on tuning in next Monday night at 7 p.m. for our next broadcast. Now, I want to give you a quick apology for last week's broadcast. We ran into a technical problem at the very last minute. It was my fault, and I could not get the broadcast back up in time to meet the 7 p.m. deadline. So we canceled the broadcast at the last moment. So I apologize for that. I'm going to mention this a little later on in our broadcast. We're going to, next week, we're going to bring Paul back and do that broadcast again. Next Monday that I abruptly canceled on our last broadcast. Okay, let's get ready now and let's move on with our topic this evening of self-governance. And I'm going to bring Gary into the broadcast and get us started. There you are. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Dale. Thanks for having me on.
Good. You disappeared there on me for a little while. I panicked a little bit.
So did I.
And I'm going to, while we're talking here, I'm going to try and bring up the my PowerPoint that I lost earlier. There it is. Okay. So, Gary, we wanted to talk this evening about self-governance, and I mentioned in the introduction that a couple broadcasts ago, Paul Phillips mentioned self-governance as part of a present or a topic that we were discussing. I think that on that broadcast we were talking about. It was democracy versus a republic.
Yeah.
And anyway, he talked about how the founders really tried to develop a government based on self-governance. So anyway, but I wanted to just let people know that your take on self-governance tonight is a little from a little different viewpoint. Am I right?
Yes, definitely. So
Okay.
Self-governance is kind of an abstract concept. And so if people don't immediately have an image of what self-government or self-governance means, that makes perfect sense, because something that's abstract kind of needs, we need some pictures, some flesh that out a little bit. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about. And self-governance.
I know you had mentioned to me that you looked at this from the standpoint of the individual versus the collective. Am I right?
Yeah. So there can be self-governance of a person self-governing themselves, the individual basis, and then there's the collective basis. And so I think it makes sense to first look at that sort of the individual basis of what self-governance means. And it kind of like involves a person exercising control or rule over oneself, which means really taking responsibility. Sometimes we think of, the individual, and in America, we have the idea of freedom and individual freedom and so forth. But really, to have freedom on an individual basis doesn't really mean so much that there are no rules on me, as it means that many rules are not necessary because a person exercises prudence and good judgment. So, yeah.
It's kind of the individual responsibility thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that's
individual responsibility, and a person takes responsibility for making good decisions and not viewing their freedom as a license to do anything they want, but really that they will exercise control over themselves so that a lot of rules aren't really necessary. And so that's kind of the individual aspect of self-governance. And then collective really relates more to as a society. And for a society to be self-governing, then people both individually and collectively need to make good decisions and exercise prudence, wisdom in the decisions that they make.
Okay. Now that in order to do that, people need to be informed, right?
Right. So in order for people to make a good decision about anything, they have to be informed. When we go to the doctor and the doctor says, we want to do this procedure, in order to have what they call informed consent, they have to explain, the pros, the cons, the ups, the downs, the potential outcomes. And we as citizens about our government, whether it's national government, state, local, whatever, or even a civic organization we belong to, if we're going to make decisions about how that organization is being operated, we have to be informed. We can't make good decisions from ignorance.
Good. Okay. All right. So making good decisions. All right. And that how important that is. Okay. Now, Convention of States can play a role in this. Am I right?
Absolutely. So at the Convention of States, we are part of our goal is educational, in the sense that we are educating people about the rights they have under Article 5 of the Constitution and informing people so that they understand that, and so they can become informed about how they, as collectively, we the people, can have an impact on how we are governed. And that's a very critical role for convention of states in terms of educationally. But we don't feel like our role is just limited to, hey, this is Article 5 and this is what we can do under Article 5.
Gary, I know you, in your role as Regent Captain, you do a lot of talking to people about Convention of States and about the Constitution and Article 5. And from an educational standpoint, I know I've always been amazed at how little people know about our Constitution, and especially about Article 5 and what it all includes. And many people have no idea of the Convention of States method of amending the Constitution. So the educational challenge is quite large.
Well, Dale, it makes sense in a way that most people, the last time they studied government was probably in high school.
Yes.
And so for, guys our age, that's been more than a few months ago.
That's just a couple of years ago.
And
5 maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, even if we studied the Constitution, most of us know, well, that kind of organized the government, and there was the Congress and the courts and the president. And, we know that the Constitution has been amended. And most people know, have to be approved by Congress and then ratified by the states. And most people don't know, hey, there's this other method. And so, right. When we are talking to people, we are typically, writing on a blank slate in that regard, that we're informing people about a method that has never been used in 200 some years. And so it is new. It's a concept that's not been used in the past, but we know that the founders put it there, recognizing that we might someday find ourselves in the kind of situation we're in today, where we need to make changes to the Constitution, and the Congress is not going to initiate the kind of changes that we feel,
that's right,
and millions of Americans feel is necessary.
Okay, well let's bring it to a close here now. So, under self-governance, Gary, who decides?
That's the big question, and there's one other point I'd just like to tick off if we've got a minute or two.
Yeah.
And that is in this idea of relates to this idea of who decides, but it's the principle called subsidiarity that's a part of Catholic social thought. And I'm not a Catholic, and I'm not trying to teach religion here, but it relates to the concept that anything that needs to be done ought to be done at the lowest level that can effectively do it. So for many things, that means, the family. The family takes care of, feeding and clothing the children, for an example. And if something needs to be done, by government, it ought to be done at the lowest level of government that can effectively do the role, decentralized. And if something has to be done at a higher level, maybe it should be done by the state. And that we shouldn't kick everything up to a centralized government just because, hey, that's what we should do. No,
right.
We should think about things in a decentralized way. Where can they be done at the lowest level? And that's something that we, the people, have to take responsibility to say, we need to make decisions about where things should be done, how things should be done. And we don't just, turn our faces toward Washington and say, you fix the problem. We, the people, need to take responsibility, be informed, and press the issues that we know the government is not addressing. And that's what we're doing at Convention of the States.
I think you're exactly right, Gary. And I think that's so important that how we believe that more and more of the decisions should be made by we, the people. So that's very, very important. All right. Well, Gary, I want to thank you for coming on tonight and taking the time to discuss self-governance with us. So, Gary, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dale. Have a great week.
let me get Gary back out of the broadcast, and let me bring up my PowerPoint presentation. I did find it, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to now set it up here. I've been told that I should make this as big as possible on your screen, so I'm going to use the option in PowerPoint to enlarge the presentation. You should have that right now. So, okay, let's go on to now our second segment. I want to give you just some general information about convention estates here in Indiana. We have a lot of resources available to us here in Indiana, not only here in the state, but nationally. And our main resource is our website, conventionestates.com. Now, this website has a wealth of information on it, and you're going to hear us make reference or refer you to this website from time to time. So conventionestates.com, that's our main website. Now, embedded in that website is our state website page, and that can be found at conventionestates.com/Indiana. That will give you a little more focused look on our state and what is going on in our state. Social media, we're on various platforms and growing, quite honestly. We're on Facebook, Convention Estates Indiana. As a matter of fact, our broadcast this evening is coming to you through our state Facebook page. YouTube, we have our own channel, COS Indiana. Now, this YouTube channel is very much an educational resource for you. We have a number of narrated PowerPoint presentations on there. We have recordings of these broadcasts. We also have a series of podcasts that our legislative liaison, Paul Phillips, who has been on the broadcast many times. Paul has a podcast called The Free to Be Free. Excellent podcast. And so we have links on our YouTube channel to all of his podcasts. I highly recommend those to you. We're on Twitter, hashtag COS Indiana. We're on Instagram, Convention Estates Indiana. We're in the process of setting up on LinkedIn, and heck, there may be some other platforms that I'm not even aware of yet that we're on. So we're trying to get ourselves out there as much as possible and to communicate with as many people as possible. Some numbers for you for the state of Indiana. In 2018, we surpassed 30,000 supporters. We've been growing tremendously here in the state. I've been growing at about a 40% growth rate per year. And given that growth rate, we're going to shoot for 40,000 supporters by the end of 2019. We're about halfway there, so we're on track to achieve that goal. Of the supporters, we have about 2,900 people that have indicated a willingness to volunteer if needed. And right now we have about 40 individuals in leadership roles of one or another type of a role. If you have any desire to get more involved in convention estates, I strongly recommend you go to, here's this website again, go to our main website, conventionestates.com, click on the menu selection, Take Action, scroll down and look at the different volunteer opportunities that we have. We are always looking for new people to step into leadership roles. And we have many openings for people across the state that would have a desire to get more involved in convention estates. So please, if you have any desire, look at those positions. If you find one that's of interest to you, open it up, read more about it. If it's still interesting to you, go ahead and make application. You're not obligated in any way. But what that does then, your name will come up on a report that I and others will see, and one of us will then get in contact with you to discuss that interest further. So please, if you have any desire to get involved, go to the website and check us out. All right. Now, last segment of the broadcast is about the basics of convention of states. There are three tenets in the basics of convention of states: the problem, the solution, and the plan. We're going to just briefly touch on each one this evening. The problem, in one short sentence, is that we believe our government's out of control. It lacks the will and the courage to relinquish power in order to address certain structural issues in our government. Now, we're not blaming any one political party. Believe me, both have contributed to this situation, and it's been going on for decades. It's nothing just recent. So our elected officials lack the will and the courage to address this problem. Now, we've identified three abuses by the federal government that comprise this problem. The first one is our national debt. Again, we're not going to get into any detail on these tonight, but if you follow this at all, you know that we're over 22 trillion. I don't know, we may be to 23 trillion in debt now. Unfunded liabilities, the last number I heard, something like $250 trillion. Very little is being done to address this particular abuse. And this is something that our country has got to step up and address. The second abuse that we have identified is the regulatory crisis. And yes, I know the current administration has eliminated some regulations, but much, much more needs to be done in this area. Not only in the number of existing regulations, but the process, the administrative state, the process that we go through to create these regulations really needs to be better controlled. And the last abuse has to do with state sovereignty and the concept of dual federalism, where the federal government and the states were supposed to share power. That has all been transferred to the federal government. We think career politicians play a big role in this, power money. So this is the third abuse that we feel needs to be addressed. Okay, what's our solution? This is what we're all about now. The solution is right in Article 5 of our Constitution. We're not making this up. It is right in Article 5. Article 5 describes the two methods to propose amendments to the Constitution. And we're going to touch on each one here. But we believe, of course, well, the first method is the method that has been used to date, that we're used to and that we know about. The second method is holding a convention of states for the purpose of amending the Constitution. So let's go ahead and let's touch on each method. As I said, the first method is where 2/3 of Congress propose amendments, an amendment or amendments, and then those proposed amendments go to the state legislatures for ratification. And ratification requires 3/4 of the state legislatures, which would be 38 states, to ratify any amendment or amendments in order for them to become amendments to the Constitution. All right. Well, there is a second method in Article 5. As I said, we're not making this up. This is in Article 5 of our Constitution. And the second method is where 2/3 of the state legislatures make application to hold a convention of states for the purpose of amending the Constitution. Any proposed amendments that would come out of that convention would then have to go through the same ratification process as in method 1. That means three-fourths of the state legislatures, or 38 states, would have to ratify any proposed amendment that would come out of the convention before it would become an amendment to the Constitution. Obviously, this is where we want to see amendments proposed that would address the 3 abuses that we identified in the problem area. All right, what's our plan? How are we going to bring this about? Well, 2 parts to the plan. The first part is what we call the application strategy. You know, I mentioned that it requires 2/3 of the state legislatures, that's 34 states, to make application. It's also referred to as a resolution, but to make application to hold this convention. Well, those applications all have to be the same. That's called aggregation. They all have to be the same. And what we have done is we've designed the application that we want 34 states to utilize. And in the subject matter of that application, which the subject matter determines the agenda at the convention, in that subject matter, we address fiscal restraints, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits. Those 3 areas of the application address the 3 abuses that we identified in the problem area. The other part of our plan is mobilizing the grassroots. And when we say the grassroots, we're talking about you, me, and our state legislators. Mobilizing the grassroots to make this happen. So we are well on our way. We need 34 states. We've got 15 that have passed this application. Indiana is one of those states. We were the 6th state to pass the application. So we're in all 50 states. As I mentioned earlier, we're over 30,000 supporters here in the state of Indiana, over 3.9 million across the country nationwide. So we're moving along very well, and we would very, very much like to have your involvement here in the state of Indiana to help us in convention of states. All right, let's get back to the screen here, and I'm going to now send that back. And I want to tell you now that our next broadcast will be on July 8th, and we're going to bring Paul Phillips back in, and Paul and I are going to do the broadcast on July 8th that we plan to do on June 24th that I abruptly ended. So we will be doing on July 8th, we're going to be doing the broadcast regarding the founder that refused to sign the Constitution. And that founder is Colonel George Mason. And Colonel Mason plays a significant role not only in Article 5 of the Constitution, but consequently then in our organization, Convention of States here in Indiana, so and nationwide. So it should be an interesting, very interesting discussion, and hopefully we don't run into any kind of a technical problem, and we'll get that handled. I want to see if I can, I see Mary Shively here, Sylvia, I think Mary had agreed with something that we had said during the broadcast. So Michelle, I should say, Michelle, thank you very much. Glad to have you tonight. And our friend James Cressy and is also with us tonight. Let me see if I can get James. Now, James, your comment at 1, he says, as we embark on the upcoming holiday, 4th of July, our independence from Great Britain let's be mindful to not overindulge. Okay, good. Let's see if I can get that up there. There we go. Got James' comment up there. Generally, when the comments are long, it's hard to see them when I bring them up on the screen. But that one, I think you can see okay. All right, James. Well, thank you. James, I believe, is a follower in the state of Missouri that has been following us, and he generally stays with us. And so appreciate you being with us again tonight, James. Here I see some other people that have joined us tonight. What was the name there? Robert Grody. Robert, thank you for joining us. Got another one there. That was Michelle. Looks like, and that was James Cressy. So there's Michelle. All right. Well, all of you, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I want to once again close out the broadcast with a quote that I just love so much, and it really ties in very much with our discussion this evening on self-governance. But that is a quote that one of our founders in Convention of States has said, and that is that our country faces a fundamental question. And that question is not what should we do, but the fundamental question is who will decide. And we in Convention of States strongly believe in the concept of self-governance, and we believe that we, the people, should have a greater say in making those decisions. So Mark says the question facing us is a two-word question, very simply: who decides? As I said, here in Convention of States, we believe it should be we, the people, playing a bigger role in who decides. Thank you, folks, for joining us this evening. Remember, put us on your calendar for next Monday evening at 7 o'clock. And look forward to seeing you at that time. Thank you all. Have a good evening.